And we're live. Hi, everyone. Hello, friendly ex-Muslim team. I have a very interesting guest for you today. This is now episode 107, I believe, of the Friendly Ex-Muslim podcast. And today we have a Muslim for you, a Muslim to talk to, and it's going to be really interesting. I am joined today by none other than Terence Nunis. So I'm gonna start off by telling you how I know Terence and how we first met and what happened there. So we have an interesting backstory. I'm just gonna mute you for a second. Terence and I have been Facebook friends for many years. Many years ago, I think maybe 2015, 2016, something like that, when I was first coming on Facebook, Abdullah introduced me to Terence, and the funniest thing happened. I forget who it was. I think it was it Zakir Naik or Mufti Mank or somebody was he was talking about banning them from Singapore. And I actually said, no, we shouldn't ban anybody. And then he started trolling me. So he started trolling me. And at the end of it, I realized, oh wait, this guy is actually a cool guy. But I was mad at him because he was making a fool out of me. So Terence is one of those type of guys that he's thinking like 5 steps ahead. And I was thinking very, superficially in terms of, we should free speech and let people speak and this and that. And I still to some extent agree with that. But so Terence, how's it going?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me in the show.
Awesome. So let's talk about can you first introduce yourself actually before we get into the discussion?
Okay, so my name is Terence Nunis. I am the CEO of a strategic consultancy. I am the president of the board of a technology startup. I'm a financial advisor. I am the former council member of the Muslim Converts Association. And basically, I wore many hats. That's a
What is
very simple way of putting it. Yeah.
what's the Muslim Congress Association? What is that?
Okay, in Singapore, there's this thing called the Muslim Converts Association of Singapore. So basically, if you wanted to do your conversion and all those other things, you went there. I was there for many years. I sat in the council, the board of directors, so to speak. I was the vice president of Da'wah. I organized all your major events, and of course, in the course of it, I got to meet and speak and interact with many policymakers and, of course, all your major scholars. Some I like, some I did not like. I had the pleasure of meeting people like Abdul Hakim Murad. I had the displeasure of meeting Zakir Naik, and so forth. Yes.
Oh, the ideas are coming out already. So when you say you're a former member, what happened? You're no longer doing that?
I left in 2011. I think the organization had run its course. It's been around for a while. And after time, you see, the thing about organizations is that people join them, they want to be seen, they have certain agendas, and it just loses its real. All the best, when the good people start to leave, you should leave so that you can be considered one of the good people. And so when I left the Convert Association, a lot of converts left as well because I used to teach and I was quite prominent. You can hear something in the background, is it?
It's okay. It's fine. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I mean on my side. No, right?
Yeah, you a little bit, but it's okay. It's not bad. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So the things I used to be involved in all that, and then I didn't like the way things were going. And so I started the sharing group, which is a Facebook group. And I think you've been there and you've seen it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of people there initially came, and we're different that we can talk about anything. You notice in most Muslim organizations, a lot of things are taboo. And you're just supposed to convert, believe, and just follow. And here's the thing. I came to Islam by thinking about things, and I came to a certain theological decision. I became a Muslim. You don't expect me to just switch off my brain and just follow because somebody said so. I spent a lot of time questioning a lot of things. I had very good teachers. I was very fortunate. But of course, in the days gone by, a lot of them have passed away. And this is what we have in Muslim communities. When the good people pass away, the people that replace them, not to the same standard. I think you're familiar with any madaris, different parts of the world, right?
Madrasa, yeah.
Right? Because madaris is the plural. So you have all these asatiza, these ustaz, ustaza, whatever. Now, there used to be a time, if you were to go back to the history of Islam, where the people who are our scholars were some of the best people around. Policy makers, administrators, thinkers, lawyers, scientists, mathematicians, and blah, 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 right? Now, who do we have? Abdul, who failed school and couldn't go anywhere else. He can't be a lawyer, he can't be a doctor, so he better be an ustaz before he becomes a street cleaner. And that guy's
Mm-hmm.
advising you on religion.
And ustaz means teacher, right? That word might not be familiar to everyone. So in case you're wondering, he's saying ustaz or ustaza, it means like it's kind of like imam, right?
Not really. Okay, I guess I'll just stick to the English then,
Okay.
for the sake of the audience. So basically, got these religious teachers. Now, the thing about religious schools nowadays is that there's no thinking involved. People who go to places like Al Azhar, most of them take up jurisprudence, because jurisprudence is just about taking rulings from the past and applying it to the present. We are not in the stage where people are actually thinking how things actually work and whether it matters. Whereas theology involves a lot of thinking, a lot of consideration. If say God is such and such, how does it apply to us? See, people don't like to think because it's painful and it's about questioning. And Muslims in general, when you start to question things, they think that it means that you have a lack of faith. Faith that is not based on knowledge is nothing more than superstition. Faith has to be based on something, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thanks for that introduction. And can you tell me about how you converted to Islam? So you have a Portuguese Catholic background. Can you tell us about what was lacking that or what appealed to you in Islam? How did you go from one to the other? What happened?
Okay, I had no intention of leaving Catholicism. I was born into it. One time I considered being a priest. But then, of course, I had certain contentions with the Catholic Church. For example, Jesus said, "Let the children come to me," but the priest said, "Let the children come for me," and it gets wrong. When Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor," I guess he said, "Don't get caught." But before we get banned from this, right? So I won't go any further in those kind of jokes.
Yeah.
So anyway, along the way, as I was delving more into the theology of Christianity, there are a lot of things I didn't like. For example, Christianity is basically the religion of Paul, not Jesus. Paul never met Jesus. So how is it that we are basing everything on his ideas, his notions, the Pauline faction of the church?
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere along the way, the first 300 years, Christianity went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we had to fix that. And they never fixed it. We had the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation, we had all sorts of things.
Sorry, what was wrong with Christianity and with Paul's interpretation or his school of theology? What was wrong with it? Was it the Trinity you had issue with, or something else?
See, the Trinity is just the basis of it. I mean, think of it this way. If Jesus is God, and Paul
Mm-hmm.
made Jesus God,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus died, did God die? Because if Jesus died and God didn't die, then Jesus is not God.
Mm-hmm.
And if Jesus died and God died, then God is not God, because creation still existed, right? So you have a theological conundrum there.
Okay.
And then, why did Jesus have to be crucified? Why was there a crucifixion? So Paul argues that well, when I say Paul, I don't mean Paul himself, because this argument was from the Pauline faction,
Okay.
Athanasius and Erasmus and Origen and company, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
idea being, long story short, before it becomes boring, is this. Okay? If Jesus died because of the vicarious sacrifice, that vicarious sacrifice is because of original sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the
Yeah.
Meatloaf song, the actual original sin.
Yeah.
So they had to come up with a whole lot of things to bend over to justify this. It became complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, long story short, it's a divine mystery. You don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
can't have that. If I want to believe in something, there has to be some level of certainty. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Islam was never on the list because I think, as you can tell, I didn't have a good impression of Muslims. I still don't have a very good impression of Muslims in general.
Hold on a second before we get there. You speak multiple languages. Which
Yes, I do.
languages do you speak?
Being a typical Singaporean, I speak English, I speak Mandarin, Malay, I know Arabic, read and write but not speak Latin, Koine Greek, Hebrew. My mother tongue is Portuguese, so
That's
I
yeah.
know a bit of Spanish and French, mostly the bad words.
So at this time, before you became Muslim, were you reading Greek and like Latin, or this was later?
No, 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 I wanted to be a priest.
Oh,
So I was on
so
that track before I. So
okay,
that's when I learned all that stuff.
yeah. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
So the thing is that when you start reading the Gospels in Koine Greek, you start comparing to what the translations say. That's when everything went wrong. You see.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved away and I decided I wanted a new faith, but I couldn't be an atheist. It's not something that I could because I've always had a conviction that we are part of something greater. I wouldn't say I was agnostic. I was in that floating around, not showing where I wanted to be. But Islam was definitely not on the list. I was thinking maybe I could be a Jew, but I wasn't much for the chosen people sort of thing. And I mean, the lottery of birth didn't was offensive to my sensibilities. So one day, somebody said, "Why don't you just read the Quran?" So I read it. I read the Abdullah Yusuf Ali translation. I didn't know Arabic then. And you see, the Quran, what a lot of people don't realize is that it is the revelation or written, depending on your position, on the assumption that you know the Bible. Most people don't realize the Quran talks about events in the Old Testament.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you know the Old Testament, you know exactly what it's talking about. It says, remember this guy. And that's it, just a name. But the name is enough for you to understand what the story is if you know the Old Testament, because the Quran doesn't tell you the whole story. It tells you the part of it that is important,
Yeah,
assuming that you know the
yeah,
rest.
yeah. That's true. The Quran sometimes differs too, right? From the biblical versions,
Yeah. So
or
the
adds more detail that isn't existing. So there's three cases, right? There's one that it basically it gives a summary of the story from the Old Testament, but less detail. Sometimes it adds new detail. For example, Jesus speaking as a baby. We don't find that in the canonical Gospels. We find that in the Apocrypha. And then the third case is basically it contains stories completely not from the New Testament. I'm sorry, from the Bible.
Yeah, correct. So the body of works known as the Israelite, but even in the
Yes.
canonical works, the Quran mentions things like, for example, the story of Ezra,
Yeah.
the how the Torah, right, was rewritten again after the fall of Babylon, the Babylonian exile, a lot of things. So the Quran spoke to me, and I decided maybe Islam was the religion for me. And after some thinking, and it took many years, I went sailing. So when I was 15, I had a disagreement with my father. I guess at 15, we all have disagreements with our parents, correct? So I left home. I went sailing. I worked on a ship as a merchant naval officer for many years. I went up to my second mate qualification, started as a deck cadet. I saw storms, pirate attacks. We had a fire in South Korea. I was in Sri Lanka during the Civil War. I had a very dramatic life. And somewhere along there, I decided that with all that drama, I needed to find God again. And I ended up with Islam. And becoming a Muslim was traumatic because you spend a whole life believing certain things and then you realize that maybe it wasn't true. Being a staunch Catholic and all that, coming from a staunch Catholic background. In fact, I said my Shahada in the church alone at 3 o'clock in the morning. Very dramatic. Nobody was there. I said, okay, fine, I'm a Muslim. I didn't know what to do. And then one day I found someone who taught me a sheikh. And then I met other people and I learned and I acquired some knowledge. And that's how it started. And then one day, with all that, I ended up teaching the religion as well.
Teaching the religion.
Yes.
Okay. How
I
and what
was.
what context were you teaching it?
I was teaching in the mosque. I was teaching at the convert
Oh.
center. I was actually qualified.
Where did you study it? Did you study formally under anyone, or was it on your own?
It was an ijazah system.
Oh, okay.
I was offered the opportunity to go to Al-Azhar and to go to a few places. But my sheikh told me, you already have a lot of knowledge. You're not going to do this full time. Getting the qualification will destroy you because it will just feed your ego. And he was right, so I didn't go. You know, but my classes were popular because I'm funny, I'm sarcastic, and for some reason, adults like that.
Yeah, kids too.
Yeah. And so,
So
yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
say?
So you converted to, so you went from Christianity, wanting to be a priest. You found Islam. It was traumatic, you said. How did your family take it?
Not very well. I didn't really tell them, and I left home for many years, and they didn't
I don't
see
know
me.
what you mean by.
Mhm.
Hey Siri, I didn't really tell them.
Just give me a
Silly.
How
moment.
about a web search
Yeah,
for it?
My computer is going crazy at the moment.
yeah.
Just hold on. Huh? Sometimes Siri just wakes up and gets involved in your conversations, and you don't know why that happens.
Yes.
It's like having a mother-in-law that doesn't shut up. So where was I?
We were talking about how your family took it.
Well, they found out in a BBC interview.
Oh, they found out in the news.
Yeah. So they didn't take it very well that I converted, and took it less well. They found out about it in that interview. And so when I came back and everybody was there, they had a meeting. My father was rather displeased. But my grandmother said, after much deliberation, at least he didn't become Protestant. And that was that. And after a while, they realized that despite being a Muslim, I'm still the same person. Still
Okay,
sarcastic, cynical, me.
that's good to know. Is your family also in Singapore?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, some of them.
So you basically, you weren't living with them, but they were still there. Like you still saw them and stuff like that.
In Singapore, we're rather close knit.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Good
I
to
mean,
know.
It's a very Asian thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now that we've done that, let's talk about some of the interesting topics related to Islam. You have, like, again, you have a very interesting background. I think you're very well read, and that's what makes you so interesting, because you don't conform to what is expected from you, which is why I like you. You say things that you basically don't care what anyone thinks, and you're happy to have your own opinions. And like you said, when people are happy when you convert to Islam by using your mind, but then they expect you to stop thinking and to conform once you get there, right? I had the exact same thing told to me. You're smart, mashallah, you converted from Ismailism, this misguided sect, to Sunni Islam. Well done. But now why do you want to, why did you want to change again to atheist? Like, you need to stop thinking. You're thinking too much. Like, I've been told the same thing. So I appreciate when people are, basically, able to make their own reach their own conclusions, despite, and to be honest, it's much tougher for you. For me, I'm not like, I don't have the expectations of any community on me, so I can say whatever I want. But in your case, the Muslim community, wouldn't you say they have expectations of you to behave a certain way, to conform? Like, if you, certain things you say actually cause a lot of people get upset at you all the time, Muslims, right?
Well, it does happen when you scold the mufti of the country, right?
What happened?
Publicly.
What did you do?
Okay, so I'm very outspoken if you haven't figured it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have certain ideas of how things are done. And of course, in the course of this, I offend people. For example, I was one of the people that advocated that Zakir Naik be banned. And I
from
wrote into
from
the
Singapore.
ministry. Yeah, and I wrote into the ministry. I gave all the reasons. Basically, it wasn't a rant. I gave a cogent and coherent argument, and he was banned. I did it for Nouman Ali Khan, Menk, quite a few others. And then there were certain incidences, and the mufti of that time was displeased with me, and I called him a vacillating imbecile.
All right.
And then things happened, and then he was no longer the mufti.
Oh wow.
And suddenly it's all my fault.
So can you tell me, maybe this is a good way to kind of get into this next topic, which is, why do you think Zakir Naik, Nouman Ali Khan, why do you think these people need to be banned from Singapore? What is it? What is your problem with these people? What is your problem with these scholars who are loved by millions and millions of people, that are respected and honored and considered like people that are like gems of the community? Like Nouman Ali Khan is considered, I mean, he has his scandals as well, but he's considered this like Arabic superstar. Like that's his focus, is Baina, right? Zakir Naik, of course, is like super famous, right? Like, so what's your problem with these people?
I think the answer is Wahhabism, right? As you know from my writings, and I think I'm quite anti-Salafi, right? From a theological contention, from the historical perspective, like I mentioned, it's not a coincidence, for example, that groups like Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they're all Wahhabi in their persuasion. That is their theology, right? And there's hard Wahhabism and there's soft Wahhabism. And if you look at it from a Singapore perspective, we are a multi-cultural, multi-ethnic country. Racial harmony is very important. I think in the same way that I come out against, let's say, Christians coming here saying that we should be a Christian nation and contend against the Hindus, or we have, let's say, rabid Buddhists, whatever. The same with Muslims. The only difference is that because I'm from the Muslim community, I have more chances of meeting these people than I have with, let's say, a rabid evangelical Christian, because I'm not in those circles anymore. Even though when I've encountered them, of course, I write in or I speak out publicly. Now, the thing is that someone comes in and tells you, see, people like this is not what they say in public. If you look at Zakir Naik, okay, Zakir Naik, let's put him aside because that guy is a special case. But let's look at people like Meng and all that. They will say all these really nice, sweet things in public. Love your mother and polish your neighbor's cat or whatever nonsense, right?
Polish neighbor's cat.
The shaven one. The things that these are sweet nothings, platitudes with no intellectual depth, no spiritual insight. But what they say in private discussions is a different story. And I've said in all these private discussions, things like you shouldn't support a kuffar government, we must beware the non-Muslims. Meng said you shouldn't attend birthday parties and events, that celebrate kuffar. Singapore, things like National Day is a big thing. You telling Muslims not to attend the National Day event? This is our national cohesion here. So that's not something that we can accept. So I wrote in, and I had discussions with people, and he was banned. The government agreed with my argument. And basically, one thing about the Singapore government is you have a contention, a position. Anybody, you can even just email the Prime Minister. I don't think he reads it. He has a press secretary or something. But the thing is that if you have a problem, you can email your minister. And if you can put forward a coherent argument for something, they will listen to you. You will even have dialogue.
Look into it, right?
They will, yes.
Yeah.
And they have. And I've had meetings with many of these people because I put forward a lot of ideas on this.
I want to push back a bit because, again, something in my mind is going off here, which is, how are you different from the Taliban banning Sufis? And I don't mean it disrespectfully, but just hear me out. Like,
I can take it, don't worry.
Yeah. How are you different from Taliban or China banning Muslims from doing? I mean, okay, China is extreme what they're doing, but like, let's just say like any group that wants to block free speech, doesn't that worry you that it's a slippery slope? That what if the same thing is applied to you one day, right? Muslims could be also banned from, like, what if the West said we don't want to allow, well, these are Muslims too, but you get my point, right? Like, this is the thing we got into a fight with when we first met. What do you think about? Don't you think free speech is more important to maintain, and shouldn't these ideas be battled out in the free arena rather than like banning them from coming? Like, what do you think about that?
Okay, I'm going to say something that's going to be very controversial, but this is I don't actually believe in free speech. If we have unfettered speech, what you have is an idiocracy. Everybody has an opinion on things, and the problem is that the opinions of the idiot masses, and I mean it in a general context, not anyone specific, right? Drown out the opinions of people who are authorities on the subject matter. Just look at what's happening with COVID-19. Everybody has an opinion. Nobody's listening to the people who actually study epidemiology.
Yeah.
And a country like Singapore cannot afford the national discourse, policy decisions to be made on the basis of sentiment. That's how I think. I mean, I used to work in government. I used to have a rank in the military. I was a police inspector as well. So I understand that sort of thinking. The idea that it's a slippery slope is actually false, because for any government that totally shuts down any form of discourse will eventually fail, because there's a disconnect between the people who rule and the people that are ruled. Rather, feedback has to be based on something. You can't say I'm hurt, my feelings are hurt. That is not enough to shape policy. Why is it hurt? Why are you offended? If you are for something, why are you for something? If you're going to move in a specific direction, what is the argument for it? We have to be very logical about these things. The problem with free speech is that it's not driven by logic, it's driven by emotion. I mean, look at democracy. Democracy is the tyranny of the masses, right? The larger the crowd, the lower the IQ. And that's why if you're going to be a demagogue, you need to have a large crowd. Because people, individually, these people are intelligent people, doctors, lawyers, whatever. But when they are moved by the emotion of the masses, people do stupid things. The 6th of January is an example, right?
Sorry, which one?
What happened in the Capitol riots in the US?
Yeah, the US is now facing the consequence of what you just said, basically, right?
And that's free speech. The thing is that free speech without responsibility is not free speech. The people who matter are drowned out. What will happen is that if you say something that's unpopular, even though it's free speech, you get cancelled.
Being cancelled is a big problem right now in the Western countries. I've been sort of cancelled myself. I don't know if I should say sort of cancelled. I mean, I have been, in a sense, cancelled, because I even though, like, I don't speak against rights of Muslims. I speak in favor of Muslim rights, everyone's rights, atheist rights. I'm all about secularism and everyone's freedom to practice or not practice. Despite that, people called my office and tried to get me fired. Luckily, I didn't get fired, but I do believe the company I was at before that, excuse me, they terminated my contract early with no explanation. It was just weird. Then they had an open position. When I applied for it, they just didn't respond. It was very strange. And then after that, at the next company I was at, I found out that this happened, that they called the company. So I believe for some period of time now, there have been people, Muslims, basically stalking me and calling up all the companies I work at and telling them to fire me. And, companies, they don't want to deal with the backlash of having, unpopular employees that are making public statements that are against whatever communities. So if someone can convince them that I'm against the Muslim community, or basically even, I don't even know what they said. I have no idea, but whatever it was canceled. Like, they were trying to cancel me. They're trying to, remove my livelihood so that I cannot continue to do what I'm going to do. But it never would have worked. I mean, I just would have got another job, and I would continue doing even more, because, as you know, that technique is just going to make me more mad and make anyone angry and make you even more, like, hostile, because rather than not doing anything, maybe, I'd get bored of doing this one day, I would burn out. But, like, when you go after someone's livelihood, especially, depending on a person's personality, that's war. Like you're basically, but yeah, this is a big problem. You're right. And I understand that. I mean, I actually don't understand that well because I've never lived in your part of the world. But I do understand that the benefits of having a tighter clamp on, access to free speech and, the dialogue and discourse, that has its benefits too, because I think what you're arguing for is a sense is a sort of elitism, right? You're saying that the people that know better are the ones that need to make the decisions. And I think even Richard Dawkins, I know you don't like Richard Dawkins, but he's argued for elitism as well, where he said kind of similar to what you said, that
I mean, it's not that I don't like him. I just not impressed with his argument.
sorry, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, not impressed with his arguments, but he's argued the same thing too, and I do understand that. That concept that if you have a democracy and people, my good friend Sharik, who is in the chat right now, I was asking him about this because if you look at India right now, you have democracy, you have secularism, but you have this being used against the Muslims, right? Because the majority are not voting on values; they're voting on identities, and so the
Yes.
Hindu community, like the Muslim community, is in big trouble right now in India, right? I mean, it's worse in some other countries, but yeah, what do you think about that?
About the Muslim community in India?
Yeah, and like what I'm saying, like, do you agree that this is what you're saying? This is an issue that when you have a democracy, people voting on values, this is a potential issue that happens because the
Okay,
majority will vote against the minority sometimes, right?
well, the things that there are a few things you said to break it down. For example, we are talking about people canceling, right? I mean, if I had it happen to me before, people call the company I work with and to ask them to fire me. Company won't fire me. I make too much money for them. Let's be honest, you know. And the thing is that it's not the same. Because I recognize how the world works. Okay, the world is a nasty place. I've been to a lot of places that are not nice. All right. So if you want to succeed, you have to be useful. You're only as good as your last deal. You know, we all know that. You're only as good as your last project, right? People talk about appeal to higher power or appeal to altruism. It doesn't work. It's appeal to self-interest. That's what makes me very successful. When I talk to my clients, I appeal to their self-interest. And I make a lot of money. Actually, COVID-19 has been spectacular because I do insurance, you know. But now we talk about the other point about the way about elitism, right? I think elitism is necessary. One of the great fallacies of democracy as we have it is the idea that everybody's opinion and everybody's vote is the same. And we know that's not so. The person who is well read and understands the issues and thinks 3 steps ahead, his vote is not the same as the person who is voting for some guy because he says the things I like, that we should say.
Yeah.
And there's a problem. India, on the other hand, is a very complicated issue because there are historical contentions to consider. But being a Muslim, this is a very unpopular thing to say. The Indian Muslim community have themselves to blame as well. The Deobandi and the Barelvis have taken two divergent paths that are equally extreme. If you want to
How?
look at, for
I
example,
don't
the
know much
Deobandi,
about these communities, so if you can just elaborate a bit.
I mean, okay, and just in a nutshell, they are both essentially supposedly Hanafi in jurisprudence.
Mm-hmm.
The Hanafi school is the school of logic. They are known as the Ahl Rai, as opposed to the Shafi and the Hanbali, who are known as the Ahl Hadiths, the people of narrations. The Deobandis are very Salafi in their outlook, where once upon a time they were not like that. We'll follow this narration even if it says something ridiculous like drinking camel urine, because allegedly the Prophet said so. Whereas in the Hanafi tradition, if it's illogical, we throw it out. We thought the need to examine the matan, the text, or the sanad, the chain. So they're only Hanafi in name, but they're not in the
Mm-hmm.
Barelvi, on the other hand, have taken this idea of following the saints, and I use this word loosely, to a ridiculous extreme. For example, if you read the writings of Ahmad Reza Khan al-Qadri, right? Al-Barelvi, he's saying things like, the Sun revolves around the earth, and whoever believes otherwise is a kafir. Because why? The Kaaba is the center in the universe, blah, blah, blah. And there are still people in that community until today using science, inverted commas, to argue that that's the correct position. And we are wrong. The thing is that these are communities that are sabotaging themselves and alienating themselves. They
Yeah.
are. How does a minority survive, right?
Mhm.
And this is something we have because the Singapore Muslim community is a minority. We are
Mhm.
less than 15% of the population. The minority survives by being part of the discourse,
Okay.
by being useful to the community at large and shaping policy. If you think that elections are haram and you boycott it, or you only support your people, and you don't have any means of intercultural, interreligious dialogue and make friends, this is what happens now.
Mhm.
It's important, especially any kind of minority, whether it's a religious context or a social context or a political context, to reach across the aisle and have dialogue. You may not agree on things. You can still be friends.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree on every single thing. You just need to find things that you have common ground with to shape perhaps legislation, shape policy. Everybody has some common interests.
Yeah. True. Give me 1 second. I need to do something. Just 1 second. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, there's something wrong with this app. It was for some reason it was not showing me the comments, the live comments. Okay, since I paused for a second, I apologize for doing that. It seems like StreamYard is having some technical issues. I'm just gonna highlight some of the super chats that we had. One of them was from Stop Scamming Man. Thank you for the £10, my friend. Zakir Naik spouted 9/11 conspiracies, though also condoned the attack. To deal with the backlash, he spent years pretending to have a weird grasp of what the English word terrorism means. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yes.
Can we comment on that, please?
Okay, Zakir Naik basically, when I use the word terrorist is somebody who terrorized another person. Now, this man is intellectually dishonest. In fact, he's dishonest about a lot of things, okay?
Yeah.
He claims to be a doctor when there's no evidence of him having any sort of doctorate, right? He's the sort of guy who says, I'm not a gynecologist, but I'll take a look. You know? So what happened is that he has a bit of that backlash. I mean, he's on record supporting Osama bin Laden. He's on record supporting Al Qaeda. He's on record saying that sometimes suicide bombing is justified. It wasn't difficult to get him banned from Singapore. We
Mm,
don't want people like that coming to our country, bringing that sort of baggage, encouraging people to that sort of lifestyle or that sort of ideas.
I don't know if you know about this, but when I was Muslim, I heard a rumor that Zakir Naik is involved in training jihadis. He has his like little thing, or he sends people. I don't know if this is something public, or if this is even true. But there
No,
was no. Okay.
he's not. I mean, I'm not his fan, but the thing is that I very much. Look at that guy. He could even train his mouth.
But he
What's
has
Zakir Naik?
millions of dollars. Like his Peace TV is massively funded, right? The guy has a lot of money.
Not only is it massively funded, okay, it is also an exercise in money laundering.
Oh.
It's just very hard to prove, okay, because he doesn't reveal the sources. He
Hmm.
doesn't issue statements like any charity. He doesn't say how much money goes to his pocket and how much of it actually goes to expenditure. If you look at the backdrop of Peace TV, it's been estimated at sometimes that entire setup costs about $1 million. Okay, the sound system and everything. So much for giving back to society, right?
Yeah.
And Zakir Naik speaks. So, for example, Zakir Naik, we got him banned from Singapore and Malaysia. The idiots across the causeway, our northern neighbor, gives him an island, okay, and a house on it. They make him what do you call it? a permanent resident. He's staying there because he can't go back to India because he's got charges to answer for.
Are those
See, that's the
legitimate
problem.
charges? Are those legit? Do you think those are legitimate charges? What are they charging him for? Do you know?
Terrorism and terrorism financing. But I mean, there may be some truth in it, but it's quite obvious that it's politically motivated.
So yeah, that's very interesting. Zakir Naik, yeah, I did look into his medical background. I think he has some medical certificate or something. I don't know about he definitely does not speak like a doctor. Like when the things he says about evolution are so stupid
Wrong.
that I don't even have a I don't even have a science background. I read like 1 or 2 books, like layman's books on evolution, and I have the responses to him. How does he not know like basic stuff about natural selection? It's just bizarre. Like if he's a doctor, I don't know what he studied, or if he just missed those classes or something. I don't know how he ended up having such like I understand if you don't like evolution and you have an actual response for it. Like say you don't believe in natural selection, but you think group selection is an alternative plausible method by how genes are spread or whatever. But then you're at least talking about something that you understand. But if you're saying it's just a theory, you sound like a clown, because that's not even a criticism of evolution. You're just saying stupid things, right? It's just a theory. What does that mean? It's just a theory.
See, the things that they don't understand that when in science, in medical science, when you use the word theory, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same as how we use it in literature,
Yeah.
When in literature, it's like, I suspect my girlfriend's a guy. It's just a theory. I haven't checked it. Okay. But in science, when you say that something's a theory, it's a bit more than that. It means there's been some studies and this and that, because as opposed to a theory, it's a law. I mean, we can go into that. So Zakir Naik is using terms that he doesn't understand. He talks about Islam, quotes the Quran, and it's all wrong. Because he speaks very fast, but when you slow down, there's so many mistakes. Okay, his exegesis of it is wrong. His narrations are wrong. His positions are essentially bullshit. And then he talks about Christianity, and this is hilariously wrong. Here's a guy who's got comments on Hinduism and Christianity, and he knows nothing about that. It's very obvious.
Yeah.
He doesn't know science. He doesn't know anything. But for some reason, people think that it's God's gift to the Ummah.
Let's talk about this a little bit. What I think is the reason people like him. Well, one, he was a student of Ahmed Didat, but the style he brings to the table.
That's also not true.
Like his parroting of chapter 1, 21, verse 21, 32, like 34, 35. John 3:16 says this. Like it's that sort of like bombastic. That's I think
correct.
Impresses people. I even know. I think this is funny. I even know an ex-Muslim who claims to be the ex-Muslim Zakir Naik. And I was thinking, you want to be known as an ex-Muslim Zakir Naik? Why? Like, what's impressive about being a parrot? Anyone can do that. That's not. But do you think the Muslim world is too? And to me, this is an issue. Maybe you would disagree, but this comes from, if you go to, for example, Saudi. I don't know about Al Azhar. You can tell me about this. But when you go to Saudi, at least let me tell you what I mean. The emphasis is on memorizing. When you go in the school of hadith, you're expected to memorize Sahih al-Bukhari with all the isnads. Like this thing about memorizing, to me, it comes from a mentality of pre-literature societies, not pre-literature, but like oral societies. In an oral society, it is most important to memorize because you don't have writing. And so the only way to preserve knowledge is you memorize it and you pass it on. You memorize it and you pass it on. And this is why, in my opinion, why the Quran, there's so much emphasis on memorization, because in Muhammad's era, that was the only way to preserve it until, you got to the point where people were writing things down. In today's age, it's stupid to memorize hadith books. Nobody memorizes law textbooks. Law textbooks are crazy big anyways, but you need to know how to apply the law. You need to know examples of case law. You need to be able to understand how things are applied, which is next level, which is why it's difficult to be a lawyer. But you have, like you said, these theologians and these faqirs that are like basically memorizing. And like they're proud of the fact that they memorize. How is that useful to humanity, to the Muslim world? Just memorizing hadith. Why would anyone even want to memorize all of these hadith today with the freaking chains? Like, why? Like, we're living in a world where we have actual issues that need to be dealt with. And this is what you spend. You take your best people and you put them in a school where for 3 years you're memorizing sayings. What's the point?
I mean, think of it this way. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with memorizing things. The issue is the problem is not the memorizing. You see, the thing about the human brain, we have the capacity to memorize a lot of things. Just ask a guy who's so into Pokemon. Memorize every Pokemon and all its stats in every game, correct? As long as you're interested in something, you find that your capacity to remember is tremendous. There's a lot of input. The issue is the output. I mean, by all means, if you want to memorize all this, good for you. You want to memorize the Quran, wonderful. You want to spend time memorizing, every issue of Playboy, who was Playmate of the Year for every single year.
Yeah.
Good for you. But the thing
Yeah.
is that after you've done that, what's the next step? There's no point in remembering all these things if you don't understand it. And the issue we have is people don't understand. People don't think about this. For example, one of the problems we have with the Quran, people who memorize the Quran, they assume that just because the word looks familiar, it means the same thing then as it means now. For example, you see the word Muslim or Islam in the Quran, you assume that it refers to Muslims in the organized faith context, or Islam is the organized religion. Whereas the Islam in the word in the Quran is referring to a spiritual state, and the Muslim refers to the people of that state, people who are calm and relaxed. And it's like Abraham and Jesus, they were Muslims, right? It doesn't mean that they took the Shahada and they were part of the Ummah of Muhammad. That's not what it means. Or you look at words like hijab. Hijab refers to the partitions between apartments. It wasn't talking about the tablecloth on the head. All the different words that we use. So the problem is that even if you're an Arab, a native speaker, and you know the words now, that doesn't mean that's what the words meant when Revelation came down. And that's just the Quran.
You're talking about Fusha versus modern standard Arabic.
Fusha versus Lacha. Yeah. The thing is that the thing is that there's also this thing called the idiomatic context.
What does that mean?
Language is full of rhetorical devices. When you are within the context of the language, you take it for granted, you don't think about it. For example, say we let the cat out of the bag. You know what it means. I know what it means, right? It's idiomatic phrase. But the people who are not in the culture, what barbarians are we putting cats in bags? All right? Or walk a mile in their shoes. Who are you stealing people's footwear? So the Quran is full of idiomatic phrases from that period of time. A lot of these things are not meant to be taken literally because they were not meant in that context. So people are taking this and applying it literally, and then it becomes a problem. We have the same problem with the Bible. We have the same people reading the We have the same people reading the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Mm-hmm. But what about when it appears to be like what do you do with references in the Quran that appear to be Muhammad's flawed understanding at the time? For example, holding up the sky with pillars that you cannot see. How would you I mean, to me, it seems like it was just 7th century misunderstanding of cosmology. And he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just quoting what he understood. Like, look how beautiful the world is. And, God holds up the birds without, he's not, without any...
Surah Nahl, yeah.
Yeah. How do you resolve that? Because to me, this is some of the things that
the
made
thing
me
is that
believe
most
Islam.
of this, the Prophet was essentially a very poetic in the way he spoke. So if you understand that, especially if you know Fusha, it's actually quite obvious. These are mutashabihat and these are mukammat. But okay, basically these are direct phrases. These are just very flat. Arabic, especially classical Arabic, is very flowery. If you could say it like this, or you could say it with a flowery way, they'll put it in a flowery way. That's the way. That's their pride in their language. They didn't write it down. So the only thing they had was the oral tradition. And part of the oral tradition was to have an extreme pride in how flowery you can make your speech. So they never understood all this in a literal context. They didn't even think about it in a literal context. As far as they know, they didn't know how it works, so they didn't think about it. We, on the other hand, and here's the problem. We come in with our baggage of knowledge, and this is the issue of scholarship. Trying to see things from their point of view, whoever they are, whether you're talking about, Marlowe and Shakespeare, or Napoleonic Europe, or you want to go further back thousands of years, what Cairo said. We need to walk in their shoes and try and see it from their perspective. And a lot of people who are not trained like that, and that includes a lot of religious teachers now, take it and apply it in their context. See, that's why exegesis of text is so difficult. What literature is, what is known as the speaker persona, the writer persona, that sort of thing. So if you're not able to see it from their point of view, what's going to happen is that people will interpret it according to their bias. What you want is their bias, not yours. And it becomes very problematic. And that's the problem in religious discourse. We haven't even brought in the non-believers. Even amongst the believers, we have this huge problem.
Do you not feel though that like when it comes to memorizing, I do agree with you. There's nothing wrong with memorizing, but all of those hundreds of hours of time could be used towards something else. For example, what I'm trying to say is the reason why Muslims memorize the
don't get me
Quran is
wrong.
because of the blessings of memorizing, and you get a crown of light, and you do shifa. I'm not shifa. Intercession for your family members.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
But I think you see the things you identified the problem, but you have missed the bigger picture. It is not the memorizing the problem; it's the indoctrination that's the problem.
Okay.
It is not that they are memorizing; it is how they are memorizing. You see, if you look at how things were done in the classical context, we're talking the great scholars, the actual genuine scholars of Islam, not the pretenders in this current age. They didn't just memorize the Quran. Okay? They had to be able to explain what they knew. For example, how they explain Fatiha when it says this and this is, give me at least 7, exegesis of it, 7 different interpretations of it. That is memorization. To memorize and then know. If you go to all these Saudi schools, they're not doing that. They are memorizing a specific, so basically they memorize the hadith and they memorize a specific explanation, their explanation, something that's convenient to them, something that's exclusivist. And they convince all these people, generation after generation, that is the only interpretation. Basically, long story short, those who believe like this go to heaven, and everyone else goes to the great barbecue down under.
I want to talk about, quite a few people are asking about that. I want to say something else though before let's talk about that first, then we'll get back to the exegesis. What do you think about hell, the idea of hell? Do you believe in an eternal hell? How do you... No? Okay, what do you believe in?
The Quran never mentions an eternal hell.
So you take... But that's a minority opinion, but there is an opinion. I think Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Arabi or something believe that hell ends. That's what you take?
Yes, that's my opinion, that hell ends. Because if you look at the Quran says, right, for those who go to the garden, a gift without end. But that verse is not there for hell. And it makes sense. Because if you're looking at it from a theological perspective, an all-merciful God cannot punish you in perpetuity for a temporal mistake, no matter how heinous or egregious it is.
And the heinous part or the egregious part here is to believe in the wrong God. It seems like a completely how do I say this, whimsical crime that doesn't hurt anybody.
You're talking about salvic exclusivity. Okay, here's the thing. I don't believe in salvic exclusivity as well because, again, the Quran never says that only Muslims go to heaven. Nowhere. It says the believers go to the garden and the sinners will go to the fire for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't state that the believers must be Muslims. So Muslims will say, oh, only Muslims go to heaven. Then you have the lottery of birth, right? Just because you're born Muslim, you're safe. Isn't that no better than Calvin and his doctrine of the elect, or Martin Luther and his nonsense? Different religions, same nonsense.
So, but doesn't the Quran say "Inna Dina Inda Allah Islam"? Like the only deen acceptable in the sight of Allah is Islam.
Again, comes back to the earlier argument. What does Islam mean? Correct.
Mm-hmm. Which is submission to God.
Exactly. And how do you submit to God? That is for God to judge, not for anyone.
But
God never said you have to specifically be a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the organized faith, to submit to God. He never said that.
Do you believe that among the Muslims then there are disbelievers? Or do you believe all Muslims are Muslim and some non-Muslims are Muslim? How do you see that? Is it possible there are Muslims, but they're actually not Muslim based on what you said? Because they're not actually submitting to Allah.
I see, the thing is that I try not to get into that because, my argument being let God be God. You know what I mean? I just focus on doing what is right by me and what's right by the world. But if you look at it strictly from a theological perspective, okay? Strictly from a theological perspective, it is possible for someone to claim the label of Islam and not be a Muslim. Not being a Muslim in this context doesn't mean we're not just talking about belief, we're talking about actions.
Mhm.
If you're an oppressor, if you perpetrate genocide, if you do things that, crimes against humanity on a massive scale, how Muslim is that?
So
Or
my
how
Salafi hat is, I don't know if it's a Salafi thing, but my previous Muslim hat is saying that Islam is always separated into actions and belief. So the belief comes first and then the actions. Isn't it the case that someone that believes in Allah, no matter what sin they do other than shirk, will eventually go to paradise? Isn't that like an Islamic belief?
Why the only Muslims? Anyone who believes in God, in whatever form and everything, has a chance. Who are we to say that God is not going to give? Did he not say that everyone will have someone to intercede for them? It's in the Quran, right? The Christians will have Jesus, and the Jews will have Moses, and every other ummah before that, right? Every other ummah, every other group of people will have someone to intercede for them. And then for those who don't have their deeds, will intercede for them. And for those who don't have the Prophet Muhammad, will intercede for all of humanity. I think that's more than enough. People are in the fire from a theological perspective. I say this from theology because I've never been there yet. I haven't been to the Day of Judgment, so I'm very careful about these things.
Yeah.
People are there for their sins. And the greatest sins you find are actually the sins against people. It's very hard to commit a sin against God when God is absolutely untouchable. What can you do to God to hurt his feelings? Don't believe in him. It doesn't affect him. It doesn't diminish him if all creation didn't believe in him, correct? But people, you hurt someone's feelings, you break a heart. Isn't that worse than destroying the Kaaba? I think that's the greatest sin.
Yeah, there is a hadith like that. Or is it in the final sermon that I think it's the final sermon of Muhammad, but he said the blood of a Muslim is more sacred than the holiness of this day, the sacredness of this city, and so on and so forth. Meaning, life is more precious even than. Although, like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yes.
There's some reference like that, right? Yeah.
But that one's talking about just violence. We're talking even more than that, right? About hurting people.
Do you not find though that Islam does, I mean, this is kind of like a religious thing in general, that it prioritizes believers over non-believers. Like it emphasizes, give the salams to a Muslim, whoever kills, the Quran says whoever kills a Muslim will be in hell forever, something like
that. No,
it
didn't say that. It said that whoever kills a
believer.
human being.
No, it says no. I'm talking about the one that specifically talks about a believer. There is a verse that says the Torah or the people that quotes the Talmud and says, whoever kills one life is like he killed all of mankind. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm talking about the other one that says whoever kills a believer intentionally, the wrath of Allah will be on him, and he will be in Jahannam forever and ever, right? There's a reference like that specifically mentions believer.
Not forever. I mean, but the word.
Sorry.
I mean, the word. See, this is we're talking about the words itself, right? The etymology of words. What is often translated as forever, right, can also mean a very long time beyond human reckoning.
Yeah, sorry. Here's the verse. Whoever kills a believer intentionally, his recompense is hell, but he will abide eternally. And Allah has become angry with him and cursed him and prepared for him a great punishment. This is the one I was referring to.
Correct. So the word eternally, right? That's the thing. This is the limitations of translation. If you speak more than one language, right? It's very hard to find the exact word to mean exactly the same thing, especially when it comes when you're school. When you want to scold someone, then you understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
this curse word in this language that means just the right thing, but it doesn't make, they don't understand it. So I got to use the English translation.
yeah. Do you not feel though like this sort of thinking of prioritizing believers over non-believers is, I don't want to say apartheid, but like it's not as ideal as humanism where everybody's equal, whether or not you're gay or straight or a believer or non-believer, black or white, you know?
I understand where you're coming from. Firstly, not everyone is equal. That's a facade that we tell each other, right? Now, here's the thing. When Muslims read this thing and they use the word believer, mu'minin, right?
Hmm.
They think Muslims. But when you look at it from a revelatory perspective, a believer is anyone who believes in God, and God is the one that determines who is a believer. You have no idea who it is. Could be a Buddhist, could be an agnostic. For that moment, he was a believer. Could be anyone. So since you don't know who is a believer, then don't take your chances. That's what it means.
So yeah, so now the next question I want to ask you is, what do you think of the classical, not classic, I don't know, the Sunni tafsir, like, Ibn Kathir and all of these? And I'll tell you what I think before you respond. My issue with the tafsir is what we find is, when we go from the older ones to the newer ones, they are um they obviously are adapting, and but like if you look at Ibn Kathir, he was writing in a time, this is what my Muslim friend told me, where there was a lot of war between the Christians and the Muslims, and every other sentence, every other paragraph, he's like, the Jews and Christians, may Allah's wrath be upon them. Like he's always cursing Christians and Jews. And even as a Muslim, I read this, I'm like, dude, calm down. Like, there's no need to be so aggressive. But what do you think of tafsir in general, and or these specific tafsir? Because a lot of the times they come up with very dogmatic, rudimentary, you know, nasty interpretations of these verses. They're not progressive. I mean, you can look at some of the modern tafsir, like the Bridges translation of the Quran, or the what do they call it? The study Quran. That's very progressive, as far as I know, compared to some of these old classical ones. What do you think about that?
Okay, firstly, when you're reading all these books, and it's not just Islam, any kind of literature, right? Especially chronicles, they're chronicling issues and events and all that. We must always remember that the writers are humans, human prejudice, human emotions, human baggage. Everyone is a creature of their moment. Imam Shafi was a creature of his time. Imam Abu Hanifa was a creature of his time. They are not without error, they're not without mistakes, they're not without limitations. So we take from a Muslim perspective, right? From a scholarly perspective, we need to sift through the things and take what is appropriate and leave what is inappropriate. For example, let's look at the Maliki school. The Maliki school had a ruling that it was haram to marry a Christian. And if you look at it just like that, it doesn't make sense, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
seems
you
odd.
must
Yeah.
but you must see where it came from and in what period. This was the time of the Inquisition. So it wasn't talking about it wasn't haram for Muslims to marry Christians for all time everywhere in the world. For that period, in that context, that was what was happening. If you look at Ibn Taymiyyah, and there's a lot of things to say about him, criticism. Why was he so angry? This was a man who lived during the time of the Mongol invasions. The PTSD of watching your entire family and village wiped out. You don't let these things go. And if you understand that background of him, he lost an eye in jihad. At least you understand that this is where he went that extreme way. Something happened that took a brilliant scholar and brought him to extremism because there was a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, a lot of unresolved issues. Only towards the end, when he was going to be put to death and everything, he made peace, and then
Mm-hmm.
So
Sorry, we
all
talked.
these people,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Ibn Taymiyyah, so all
Even
these
to me. Okay.
people, yeah, all these are human beings. Imam Shafi, in the Shafi school, it says the women must wear the niqab. You've heard that, right? The niqab is
No, I
wajib.
didn't know that. I didn't know that.
So some people apply, especially in Yemen. But then if you go back and look at his ruling, it was basically like this. This was a time of banditry, wars, Mongol invasions. Women still needed to travel for work, for Hajj, and this and that. Because if you can travel, you are menfolk. And if you don't have any menfolk, then travel with groups of women is more safe. And if you still have to travel, then cover your face. And it makes sense. But what happened is that hundreds of years later, people are too lazy to read through the entire passage, went to the last part, okay, this is the ruling. And that's what's happening throughout Islam.
Mhm. That brings up another question in my mind though. Like, why do you think? I mean, do you agree that there should be only 4 schools of thought? I mean, to me, that's kind of weird and bizarre. I mean, I know there were
There are
other
no,
schools of thought that died.
there are no 4 schools, there are more than 4 schools of thought, even
Okay.
right now. People talk about the 4 is because they're the most well known. It doesn't mean that there are only 4 schools of thought.
What are the
They've
other ones?
always, okay, firstly, in terms of jurisprudence, right? In Sunni Islam, there are 5 schools right now, right? The
Shia,
4 that you
right?
know.
Jafari,
No,
right?
no. The 4 that you know, that means the in order of
Hanafi,
the oldest
Maliki,
to the youngest.
Shafi.
Maliki,
Yep.
Hanafi, Shafi, Hanbali, and then there's the Zahiri. The Zahiri is a very interesting school in that it went extinct hundreds of years ago, and then was recently revived in the early 20th century. So there are 5 schools.
Wasn't there a Laythi school as well? Kind of
Okay,
stretch.
so you're going all the way back. Okay, but
Yeah.
let's talk about in the modern context.
Okay.
The Zaidis are a sect and a school. The Isna Jafari is a school, the 12th Islam, but their sect. But the school is the Jafari.
Mhm.
The thing about the Jafari is the Jafari straddles both Sunni Islam and Shia Islam.
Sunni Islam too?
So
I did not know that.
they're very rare. So the thing is that a
Okay.
school of jurisprudence can straddle more than one sect.
I
The
didn't know that.
Hanafi schools, for example, straddles some Hanafis were Sunnis and some are Mutazila.
Oh, I see. Interesting. But do Mu'tazila still exist today, or are they all gone?
Well, then there's no Mutazila organized sect, but there's certainly individuals
Okay.
who adhere to certain positions. They're not enough for them to form a sect.
Are you one of them?
I don't think so. I'm I'm around the border here and there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there are certain Mutazila positions I don't agree.
Oh, such as?
For example, the Mutazila believe that they are extreme rationalists, but the thing is that you can be rationalist to the extreme where you become irrational. It seems like an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, there are people, for example, that they are so good that God doesn't know what to do to them. They're too good to go to heaven and not good enough to go. Too good to go to hell, but not good enough to go to heaven. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Wasil ibn Atta and all that. Now, for me, that's illogical.
Yeah.
You know.
You
And
you
then
definitely. Yep. Go ahead, Si.
you saying?
I was okay. I sorry for interrupting. You definitely strike me as someone that's more on the rational side of things. So you definitely, appealing more to rationality than most Islamic scholars tend to do, because a lot of them, they just stick to the dogma, right?
Yeah, I'm very rational, but I'm not Mutazila rational, because the thing about the Mutazila is that sometimes you need to know your limits. Certain things you just don't know. You can't rationalize things you don't know. Then it becomes speculation. Now, speculation has to be based on something. If it's based on nothing more than your feelings, then it's just fairy tales. And that's why I'm not an outright Mutazila, so to speak. But the thing is that
Okay.
the Hanafi school has always been very pro Mutazila. If you look at the early
Oh, yeah.
writings,
Oh, okay.
in fact, a lot of Mutazila scholars were Hanafi. You know what I mean? So in the modern context, we got quite a lot of schools. It's just that people only know 4. If you go back to the earlier days of Islam, there were there were at least 20 other major schools. Ibn Hazm had a school. Ibn Laysir al-Samarkandi had a school. Sufyan al-Sawri had a school. Yeah, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak had a school. But then first he said Imam Abu Hanifa, and then he left Abu Hanifa and said Imam Malik.
Mhm.
So what happened is that along the way, the schools consolidated into
Mhm.
what we will call these super schools. But we always assume that these schools of Islam, these schools of jurisprudence, are one monolithic block, and that's not true. They were like super schools with different ranges of opinions. And in a modern context, some of these opinions are different enough that they could virtually be different schools. So schools
Yeah.
merge and split. It's a natural course. The thing is that many of these scholars, we give them certain labels
Yeah.
because we assume, okay, Imam so and so, I think he's Shafi'i because he sounds very Shafi'i. You know what I mean? Imam so and so could be Hanbali. For example, Imam Abu Hari.
Bukhari?
We don't even know which school he was. Some people assume he's Shafi'i. Some people assume that he was Zahiri.
Yeah.
Some people think that he had his own school. We don't know. He never said.
So there's a question for you. I, as a Salafi, was drawn. I wasn't Salafi the entire 15 years I was Muslim. I was generic Muslim because I converted from Ismailism, like I told you. Eventually, I started inclining towards Salafism, and one of the reasons why was I read Bilal Phillips' book, where he talked about how at the Haram, Makkah, there was 4 prayers, one for each school of thought at one period of time, and he's like, there's no reason to have only 4 schools. And so we take the evidence, and you know this is a common Salafi argument, that why limit yourself to what Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, my hadith, and they quote things like when they say, whatever Muhammad said, that's my madhab. And so the Salafi position of just taking, whatever, what's wrong with that to you? Why don't you like Wahhabism or Salafism? What's your issue with that?
My contention is Wahhabism has got nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with their theology.
Okay.
This is jurisprudence.
Okay, what's the issue?
Okay, firstly, let's talk about what you just mentioned. Whatever the Prophet said, that is my mazhab. Fine. Are you qualified to know what the Prophet said? See, that works if you know your.
So Salafis will say Imam Malik and blah blah blah, all these people. Imam Malik's a bad example because he was in Medina, but like the Imam Abu Hanifa is a better example. He was in Iraq, I believe, and he had not that much access. Not that much access to hadith, so he uses a lot of qiyas analogy. Whereas now we have Bukhari, so that's the argument. Now we have Bukhari and Muslim and all these people. So why don't we just use that?
Well, here's the thing: they're assuming that hadiths magically came in the time of Bukhari and Imam Abu Hanifa didn't have any. I mean, there were a lot of Sahaba in Kufa. Okay. There were a lot of Tabi'in who were there. Imam Abu Hanifa was one of them. He certainly knew hadith. He wrote a book about hadiths, explaining his position. It's just that he didn't emphasize hadiths, that's all. The reason he didn't emphasize hadiths was because, for example, Imam Malik didn't emphasize hadiths. We assume that he did. What he emphasized is known as the urf of Medina, the culture and practices of the people of Medina at the time of the Prophet. And he could do that because they were still alive.
That's something unique to his school of thought. That he goes by the people of Medina.
Right. Yeah. So after him came Ibn Hanifa, who's actually older but became a scholar after him. And Ibn Hanifa moved to Kufa, and he dealt with a lot of converts, all these Persian converts coming to Islam. And these hadiths were not helpful because none of it addressed their situation. Correct. So they emphasize what is known as Ra'i, right?
I forgot what that means. What does that mean?
Basically, logic,
okay.
Rational thinking, for want of a better term. After him came Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi was born on the day Imam Abu Hanifa passed away. He was a student of Abi Shaybah, right? Now, the thing is that Imam Shafi didn't set out to start another school. Now we had all these narrations coming, and most of it was bullshit. Somebody had to sort it out, and he wrote the Kitab and everything, talking about his ideas on how we sort it out. And that's how the school of narrations were born. Before that, you didn't need it, because if you wanted to know whether it was real or not, the guy is still alive, just go and ask him. Right?
In Medina, you mean?
No, the Sahaba were all over.
Oh,
they were in Medina, in Kufa, and this and that.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And all their students and their family was there. But when these people started to pass away, wars and this and that, and Islam spread, you can't just go all the way back to the Haramain in the heartland and ask them, right? I mean, when let's say you're in Madain or maybe on the borders of the Byzantine Empire in Anatolia. So somebody had to start sorting them out. And that's how the Imam Shafi was the one that essentially started the field of hadith as a distinct school from a distinct religious science from jurisprudence. Imam Nawawi was the one that started the Shafi mazhab, not Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi basically was essentially Hanafi. His teachers were all Hanafis. He disagreed with his teachers on how to derive rulings, but it was Imam Nawawi that codified it. You see? And then Ibn Hanbal was the student of Shafi, and Ibn Hanbal was what you call, he was on the path of wara, caution. So because he was on the path of wara, he says all these things, the mutashabihat, these metaphorical verses, we don't question it, we accept it as it is. So you notice that everything slowly became ossified along the way, but in the beginning, there were many schools and the religion was alive. But it went through a second flowering and a third flowering until like 300 years ago. It's like, oh, okay, we're going to close the doors of ijtihad. Nobody questions anything anymore. Everything that's needed to be said was already said. The Francis Fukuyama of the time, the end of history, everything's already been done. Right? And of course, they were wrong. Now, the Wahhabi school arose in that period. So what they took the Asari creed of the Hanbali Mazhab, the Hanbali school. Instead of say, okay, the Mutashab, these metaphorical verses, we take it as it is. The Neo Asar said, we take it literally. And when they started taking things literally, then they became a distinct sect.
Okay.
And that's when the theological problem started. Because if God has a hand, but it's a hand unlike you and I have, isn't God an idol?
I see.
You see? And then it just got worse and worse. So God is in a place. And if God is in a place, that means he's no longer Akbar. It's because something had to contain him. If God literally descended in the seven heavens every night and the world is round, so you see some places up, some places down, you start running into problems.
Yeah. You're right. The Salafi interpretation of Allah coming down literally without us understanding what it means, it doesn't make any sense. Because again, the world is round, and which actually causes some Salafis to go back to flat Earth, because although it's not that common, but there are people like that because they don't know how to resolve this. So either they throw out the science, which is the flat Earth basically, or I don't know what they do in their mind. They somehow.
Here's the thing: if
Yeah.
God is absolute, can an absolute God move from one place to another? Because if God moves, that means there's some place that God is not. That means he's no longer omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, which totally denies the nature of God in the Quran, or the nature of God is found in the Torah.
So do you think the Ash'ari school of thought makes more sense, that we don't they don't take these things literally, like God's
Okay,
hands could be his power and whatever?
Okay, here's the thing. There is no such thing as a perfect school of thought. Every school of thought in every field arose as a reaction to something. The Ash'ari school rose as a reaction to the excesses of the Mu'tazila school. So some
I see.
things make sense. For example, it is very obvious for anyone who understands Arabic that many of these verses are idiomatic phrases, rhetorical devices. I said God descends to the seven heavens doesn't mean that God goes anywhere. It means that he is more apparent to you in the darkness of the night. The world is still. The voices in your heart are silent. You can hear the divine voice, so to speak, right? Your neighbors are not shouting. The cars are not honking. It doesn't mean that God took an elevator down. So the
Yeah.
Ash'ari school understands it that way. The Maturidi school understands it that way. So the Ash'ari and Maturidi have slight contention, some minor issues like, is there a possibility of female prophets? The Ash'ari school says yes. The Maturidi school says no. That sort of thing.
Okay. Very, very interesting. This was quite a deep dive into theology. I wanna go back to fiqh now, and I want to talk about apostasy and killing apostates. And what do you think about? I mean, I know what you think about that, but tell us what you think about the hadith that say if anyone changes the religion, kill them.
Throw it out. There's a lot of hadith.
How
I
do you
mean,
throw it out? If it was Muhammad said it, can you just throw it out? Like,
there's the question: how do we know Muhammad said it? That's the thing with hadiths. There are a lot of hadiths. Okay, Imam al-Maturidi said, if a narration is contrary to reason, and I'm paraphrasing him, then we can discard it without the need to examine the text, the
contents?
matan, and the chain. I give you an example. Okay, camel urine, drinking of camel urine, Sahih, right? If urine is najis, what's the urine of camel so special? Is that
So
logical?
They would some scholars would say it's an exception.
Why would it be exception?
I
On
don't
what
know. It
basis?
doesn't make any sense, obviously,
No,
right?
I mean, think about it. I mean, these are the arguments. I mean, this is not the argument. These are the discussions I had with scholars, right? So, how do you come to the conclusion as an exception? There has to be something for you to base and say there's an exception, right? You can't say it because you want to accept it. There must be a reason. Right? Is there something that says no, nothing? How about stoning, lapidation?
Mhm.
Stoning is not in the Quran. Why is there a penalty for stoning? Imam Shafi says that stoning is necessary. I disagree with Imam Shafi because we don't know whether the narrations of stoning came before or after revelation. We don't know. We can't date it. The second thing is that it is inconceivable that any hadith can abrogate a verse of the Quran because the Quran is revelation, hadiths are not. Thirdly, the Quran specifically says the penalty for what do you call it?
Lashing, fornication,
For
adultery.
zina is adultery. I'm trying to find the English word something, yeah? Apologies. It's lashing. If you're a slave girl, you're lashed half as much. Can you be stoned half to death? And when you think of it logically, all this. So the thing is that when you apply logic to this, right, you can start throwing away a lot of verse. For example, there is a narration in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The Prophet was stricken with sihr, black magic, such that he didn't know night from day who was coming and going. Can we accept that the Prophet was in such a state? Because if we were to accept that, that means all revelation in that period will be called into question.
Yes, yeah.
That will contradict the Quran that Allah protects revelation.
Mm-hmm.
You see, when you start applying logic, and there's a lot of hadiths you can start throwing out.
So my question to you is this again, Salafi hat. This is becoming an interesting Salafi versus traditionalist, or I don't know how you define your position, but
I'm actually a traditionalist, you know.
okay, exactly. So this is what I wanted to ask you because I'm thinking as a Salafi now. I remember as a Muslim, I hearing some of these like things from people like Shabir Ali. Shabir Ali actually is basically agreeing with you in almost everything that you've said.
I've heard his books, yes.
He says he's as a Muslim. So this was like ages ago. Like he was saying this, and he's considered like a very mainstream da'i. Okay, he's not a scholar, but he's a da'i, and he's very mainstream. But he was saying things like what you said, like you throw out hadith that don't make sense, that are against reason. That he said, for example, if there's an outsized reward promised for some little thing, you throw it out. It doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, if you look at your mother, you get like 10 hajjs. I don't know if there's a hadith like that. I'm just making it up. But like, he's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Throw it out, right? Like how you look at your mother with love and you get like 10 hajjs or something. Like doesn't make any sense. Like hajj is, a serious thing. You have to struggle and pay money and blah blah blah. So and then other examples are like the ones you gave. But here's my question as a Salafi, I was struggling with what do I do with what Shabir Ali said. I wasn't Salafi at the time, but eventually I ended up becoming Salafi and just saying, Shabir Ali is misguided. He doesn't know anything. I'm going to go by what Hadith says, Bukhari and Muslim. That's it.
See,
right?
what Shabir Ali said is the traditional Muslim position.
Is it? Okay.
You see, here's the thing. Until the last 200 years or so, the average Muslim didn't do anything in Hadith because Hadith was the province of the scholars. Imam Sufyan Ibn Uyayna says, Hadiths are misguidance for everyone except the scholars. Because they're not meant to be used. A hadith doesn't become a ruling. It doesn't become a legal opinion. It is the basis for one. We take it and we apply what is necessary, and what is not, we discard it.
Yeah,
Sahih Bukhari is just a book of narrations. That's all. A phone book.
So I want to I can't highlight comments because something's wrong with StreamYard today, but I want to share one comment. Pylos Kitty Cat says, in my opinion, a Muslim that throws out Sahih Hadith isn't a Muslim anymore. You're just taking what makes you happy and ditching the ugly parts. So I'm going to respond to this as an ex-Muslim, as a non-Muslim atheist, agnostic atheist. I don't agree with that comment because what you are doing now is you are engaging in theology. You are becoming a mufti. You are saying as a scholar, so non-Muslims should be careful about, engaging in theology. It doesn't make sense. If you're not a Muslim and you're not a Muslim scholar, why would you say things like a Muslim needs to do this and a Muslim needs to believe this? It doesn't make any sense. Like
It's
when
colonialism.
Dr. Bill Warner said something kind of as ludicrous as this, where he said Muslims have to believe, have to, like a proper Muslim is a jihadi Muslim kind of comment. It doesn't make any sense because you're not Muslim, you're not a scholar, and you're telling Muslims what to believe. It doesn't make sense. Even Muslims themselves don't say this because, as you can see, the different schools of thought, Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi, and Hanbali, they don't. I'll give you an example. Hanafis consider if you touch a woman, your wudu is broken. There are hadith, Sahih
No,
hadith.
Hanafis is the opposite. If you touch the
Hanafis
woman,
say
you will do.
it's not
It's not
broken.
broken.
Okay,
Your
sorry, I
Shafi,
mixed it
that's
up.
broken. Yeah.
So the hadith says that Muhammad, when he was praying, he used to like push Aisha out of the way because they were in a small room. So obviously, if he's praying and he's moving her legs, the wudu is not broken. So there's a hadith that contradicts the school of thought's opinion.
No, it's not very high. It's basically the understanding. For example,
Yeah.
what it means is
But
that
my point is that
yeah.
the hadith, you can't just take the hadith and say anyone that rejects this hadith is not Muslim, because it's
Okay,
more complicated. It's more
I'll give you a
complicated than
better.
that. Okay,
Okay, I'll
give me a
give you
better
a better
example.
idea. Okay,
Okay.
like this. Okay, let's say if a Muslim rejects a Sahih hadith, he's not a Muslim. Okay, that's the argument. That is the contention.
Yes, that's the contention. Yeah.
The question is, who decides if it's Sahih? If Imam Bukhari considered a hadith Sahih, Imam Malik, who came 300 earlier, says no, does that mean Imam Malik is now out of Islam? Is it
That's
logical,
an
right?
excellent point. The Sahih is the Sahih according to that scholar. The Sahih of Bukhari means Bukhari considered it Sahih, not that it's Sahih to God. It's Sahih to Imam Bukhari.
Correct.
That was his best guess effort. And he used to pray, apparently he used to do wudu and pray 2 rakats before every single hadith. So he didn't know either. Like he was doing his
think
best.
about it this way.
Yeah.
Imam Bukhari knew 1,000,000 hadiths, right? And out of 1,000,000 hadiths, he put
Supposedly,
700,000.
right?
If he did 2 rakats, how many years did he pray? That's hyperbolic.
But the point I'm trying to make is that it's a human effort at the end of the day, and
It is.
he's not a prophet. And
Okay, for example, I give you a famous hadith,
okay,
right?
sure.
And the authority of Hisham ibn Urwa. Okay, so I won't go into the Arabic, just say in English and just keep it short, right? He said that the Prophet married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. And everyone was going, yes, this is true and this and that. Imam Bukhari wrote it 300 years later. Imam Malik, who lived in that time, and all these people were still alive, rejected it as fake, as false. So this idea of Aisha being a kid is not even accepted by most Muslims of that time.
Imam Malik rejected that hadith?
Of course, it's not in his muwatta.
Oh, you
In
mean,
fact,
but hold on a second. But that doesn't mean does that mean he rejected it? Or maybe he just didn't know it?
he commented that when Hisham said that, okay, there are 2 things. Number 1, he was very old and his memory was going. Number
Hisham
2,
ibn Urwa.
Hisham ibn Urwa, right? The second thing is that it contradicted an earlier narration by him. You see, here's the thing. You have hadith and then you have this thing called timelines. We can use mathematics to calculate. We know what year she was born. We know what year she passed away. You know what year Aisha went to. We don't know exactly year that she married, but we know what year she went from the Battle of Badr and this and that. And when you calculate backwards using mathematics, not narrations, she was probably 17 or 18 years old. Because Aisha was betrothed before she met the Prophet to Jubair ibn Mut'im. If she was allegedly betrothed at 16, what? She was betrothed at birth, is it? And it doesn't make sense, right? So the thing is, when you use mathematics, okay, here's the thing. As a person of logic, I use maths and calculate from the timeline. Aisha was probably, let's say I was going to be kind, right? Because we don't know between solar year and lunar year and everything. Let's say she was 14 or 15. Still acceptable for the time. It's still very far from 6 and 9. So based on that, based on the maths, okay, we can safely discard it even if Imam Bukhari considered it Sahih. Because Imam Bukhari was talking about narrations and text and this, he's not formulating a ruling. Now, this thing is no longer just an academic discussion because places like Yemen and Saudi Arabia have no minimum age for marriage.
Yep. That's
So,
right.
so now we have child rape and child abuse because of a narration that somebody made a mistake 300 years later.
Mm-hmm.
You see, now you find that these discussions are no longer academic when people use it to abuse certain positions.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's not just no minimum age. They can't even change it because they believe Muhammad married a child, so therefore you can never change this because it's halal, right?
Correct. And the thing is that most, even especially people who are not friendly to Islam, saying it and making a strawman argument as if all Muslims agree that. Of course, you got people like Jonathan Brown who are arguing, why do you have a problem with that? Jonathan doesn't like me, by the way.
He's also argued in favor of slavery too.
Yes, he really doesn't like me.
What happened? Did you guys get into a discussion or something, or how did he know about
Oh,
you?
yeah. Everyone knows about me. I'm quite famous, actually, especially in the Muslim community. I'm quite well known. So anyway, what happened was that I was talking about this narration. I was explaining why we should reject it. It wasn't my opinion. I used Imam Malik and this, and somebody tagged Jonathan because apparently he wrote a book that says it's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Now Jonathan didn't just come by himself. He brought his whole coterie of followers. And suddenly my wall was bombarded with 20, 30 people on why I'm rejecting Buhari and this and that. And I said, look, this is my argument. Okay, this is the date that Aisha was born, based on this. This was the date she passed away based on this, and this and this. And I gave a very clear argument. I said, well, what about hadith? I said, if the hadith doesn't meet, no hadith tells you can travel back in time. You can't bend the laws of mathematics just because you have a narration.
Yeah. I understand your argument for sure. But what I want to ask you, this is what I was getting at. As a Salafi, I was taught two things. Again, I'm saying Salafi, but I don't know if it's limited to Salafism. One is that here's two things. Okay, I'll try to let me finish and then you can respond. The first thing I was taught is that Islam is all about submission, and submission means to suspend your intellect and to accept what is being taught. The hadith that was quoted was, or the athar was, Ali. He said if Islam was based on rationality, then we would do khuf on the bottom of the feet of the socks and not the top, because you wipe over the socks when you're wearing socks. You don't have to take your socks off. And he was saying this shows that Islam is not based on following your intellect, but based on that. The second question I have, and then you can respond to both of them, is that I was taught the Sunnah is the interpretation of the Quran. So it's not like when you say that the hadith cannot contradict the Quran. Well, what if isn't the hadith the exegesis of the Quran? Isn't what Muhammad did the the interpretation of the Quran? So if Muhammad did something that seems to contradict the Quran, such as stoning, couldn't we say that? I mean, the stoning one is hilarious. It's so hilarious because Muslim scholars, some of them will say that stoning is an example of a ruling that was abrogated from the Quran.
Yeah, I
Because
heard that one, yes.
there's a hadith that says that there
On
was
the
a stoning.
authority of Aisha. Yes.
Yeah, but it still continues. It gets bizarre. Like Allah removed the verse but continued the stoning. But what do you say about that? Because that's like, isn't that the Sunni position?
No, it's not.
No. Okay.
Look, here's the thing. There's no one position in Islam.
Yeah.
It's got very divergent and many different traditions within it, intellectual traditions. Firstly, there is nothing in Islam that says we accept the corpus of hadiths, the idea that there are narrations and everything. There's nothing that states we must accept every single hadith. It's not part of the religion. Hadiths are just
Agreed. Fully agree. Yeah.
secondary sources. The second thing is in qualifying narrations, there are many different methods depending on the school. And according to Imam Maturidi, who was also a Hanafi scholar, one of the primary contentions is logic. If it's illogical, we throw it out. For example, the one about stoning, I said, are you trying to tell me that God Almighty couldn't protect one piece of paper from a goat? Are you trying to tell me that there were 10,000 people who memorized the Quran and every one of them in that period of time forgot the exact same verse magically?
Well, they didn't have to all forget it because it was Uthman that decided what went in and what didn't go in the canonical Quran that we have today, right?
No, that's not what happened. You see, the thing is that it was all based on. See, the Quran started out as mutawatir traditions. People memorized it and then it was written down. What Osman did, he didn't take or change anything. He just, you see what happens, you got all these people coming into Islam who are not Arabs, Persians and the like, right? So if everybody was an Arab, I didn't have to put the shakal, the two dots,
The dots,
the
yeah.
top of the button. It didn't matter because you knew, look at it, you knew what it was. But if you're not an Arab, it became a problem. So that's what the Osmani Quran was about, but putting those dots and those lines and everything, so people who are not Arabs knew how to read. He didn't add any verse, he didn't change any verse. There were some Sahaba, their pieces had explanations, their own notes. Those notes were put aside in what is known, what became our books of exegesis, but they're not part of the Quran. There's no controversy there. And we went and all the 10 major readers, they all agreed that it was correct. Imagine if one of them said, if all 10 forgot the same verse. It's illogical, right? Secondly, a God who is absolute doesn't change his mind. You and I change our minds because we have new information or new ideas, or we have a lack of the full knowledge of the situation and we doubt ourselves. God doesn't doubt, and God doesn't get new information. Cannot be there's something that God doesn't know. So this doesn't apply, so that thing is rejected. And that's the issue with all these narrations, you see. People who talk about narrations, there are many things about hadith. Hadith is the most difficult field of the religious science to study. Like people don't understand. For example, there's a hadith when they ask, did the Prophet do istinja? He cleaned himself after going to the toilet with the left hand or the right hand? So they asked Aisha, and Aisha said left hand. And they asked Salama, and Salama said right hand. Does it mean they contradict each other? No, because if you go to the exegesis of hadith, the sharh, Aisha was talking before the Prophet did it, he took his wudu first. And Salama was talking only about the istinja itself, we taught the wudu before and after. So when you say okay, the Prophet did it, so it's an interpretation that is correct. But that's still not the full story. A hadith is a snapshot of a moment. So sometimes what happened, the Prophet, I mentioned you and I are having a conversation. Okay? You're the Prophet friendly ex-Muslim. And somebody walks in and just hears that one thing you said. There's a hadith. But it doesn't tell the whole story because you had a whole paragraph that he didn't hear, you see? And some hadiths are like that. People wrote it down because they loved the Prophet. They wanted to hear something from it. But they didn't think that there was the whole story and they didn't apply it. It was just there on the books.
Mm-hmm.
Muslims came 300, 400, 500 years later and didn't understand it. Just because a hadith is there doesn't mean it's useful. There are a lot of hadiths there, they're just there. It's something for the scholars, for academics to discuss. It's never meant to be used in jurisprudence. In fact, there are very strict rules what can and cannot be used in jurisprudence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a good answer. Thank you. Now, I want to, before we run out of time, because this was very important, I want to talk about the state of the Muslim world, Indonesia, Malaysia, especially your part of the world. How Muslims are behaving. And, you actually made some comments like, sometimes even I don't like to be around Muslims, something to that effect. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, firstly, if you notice, I'm very much into the intellectual path, all right? So I make there's a dichotomy between what is Islam, the theological and jurisprudential position, and Islam, what Muslims do.
Yes.
And the average Muslim doesn't know Islam. What they have is their cultural superstitions that they mistake for the religion. In itself, it's kind of sweet. But when it becomes denigrative to non-Muslims, when it becomes oppression, when it becomes a reason for corruption, something has to be said. Now, this part of the world is largely moderate. Malaysia, on the other hand, is becoming a more hardline in the last few years, and that's kind of worrying from a Singapore perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
is that because of Zakir Naik or just in general?
Zakir Naik is a symptom, not the main. I mean, the guy is not as influential as from a policy level, but a lot of Saudi money is pouring into there. Malaysia, as you know, is run out of money. So
Oh.
whoever, I mean, basically corruption and mismanagement of the economy and all that. So whoever pours enough money there shapes the whoever pours money in shapes the policy. So Malaysia is now leading towards China, one belt, one road, and all the other stuff. You know, Indonesia is a bit more independent because it's a much larger nation, the most populous in Southeast Asia, wealthy in resources, still recovering from the events of the Asian economic crisis. So what happened in Indonesia is they are having pockets of what do you call it, extremism. From a Singapore's perspective, we are very careful not to let these people in because we're a very small country. I mean, we're insanely rich, of course. And I mean, after Crazy Rich Asians, I think the cat was out of the bag for that one. But we're still a very small country. We're very careful how we navigate our way around the world. Singapore has a very difficult relationship with the Muslim world, if you notice.
How so?
Malaysia, well, we are a non-Muslim island in a Muslim sea, surrounded by major Muslim nations. When Singapore separated from Malaysia, it wasn't the best of circumstances. Indonesia wanted Singapore and Malaysia to be part of the Nusantara, and we fought a war called the Confrontasi, the history of Singapore. No, there was a communist insurgency. So along the way,
Mhm.
they would like Singapore to fall in line with the rest of the Muslim sea. And of course, in 1965, Singapore invited Israel here to train our military. We have very close relationships. And that creates some kind of problems with countries around this part of the world. The Muslim community in Singapore it's fractured along several lines. I think they are very prone to all these conspiracy theories, the nonsense about the Illuminati. At one time, this Harun Yahya,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah, yeah,
Adnan,
yeah. Harun Yahya. Harun Yahya?
yeah,
Adnan
Harun
Okta?
Yahya, yes.
Yeah.
He had a following here. The guy is anti-intellectual idiot. His creationism is borrowed from Protestantism, right?
Yeah.
And a,
Yeah.
and a poor copy at that. Having these videos with girls dancing around him. Right? How Islamic is that? Good God
He's
Almighty!
such a weirdo. Yeah.
Right? He was arrested for sexual exploitation and money laundering and all that. So the thing that people like this have a following in this part of the world, that's kind of, I don't know, whether it's worrying or something. You think, are these people idiots? You know? And of course, you think about in terms of our intellectual traditions, our scholarship, right? This part of the world used to have many great scholars, and I had the privilege of studying under a few of them. But since they passed away, what we have left with is nothing close.
Mhm.
People who are very small-minded, people who are very focused on very niche positions in specific schools. Like this is a Shafi ocean, and I'm one of the few Hanafis here.
Oh,
And the
okay.
and the thing about converts we are trophies. You convert to Islam if you just follow what everyone says and they love you. And when you start to have an opinion, then you're not a real Muslim.
I know
I mean,
I
I've
know
been
exactly what you mean about being a trophy. That is so true. You're paraded around because people see you as being what they can't be. They might not pray, even sometimes they might not fast or whatever, but you're the best. So why am I like this weak Muslim? And look at this guy, he's not even born Muslim and he's doing all these things. So people look up to converts for sure.
Yeah, but the thing is, I didn't come to Islam to be someone's trophy. I didn't come here to adhere to their intellectual traditions. I mean, and that's what's happening right now.
Yeah. So
Being a
so
convert in this okay, being a convert in this part of the world is tough.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah? I'm gonna say I don't think the community here is not friendly to converts. They
Mm.
think they are. What they really want is people to validate their beliefs. They don't care about us, and that's why we have the sharing group. If you go and you ask all those, we had these threads, all the sob stories and the horror stories. Ultimately, we're not here to be victims. We have to take care of ourselves. I don't trust the scholarship, and that's why I studied Islam.
Yeah, the sharing group, by the way, I can't show it on my screen because Facebook is down, WhatsApp is down, everything is clashing on the internet now.
Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
it seems like something happened somewhere, maybe some pipeline was cut or something. But whatever the case is, whatever's happening, Terence has a group called The Sharing Group, literally The Sharing Group. You can find it. I'll put the link in the description after the show, where you can ask questions and have conversations on these topics. And you get a lot of his views, and he's answered a lot of questions on Quora as well. So you like, but okay, let's not talk about that. I want to stick to this topic right now before we run out of time.
Yeah.
So the Muslim world, do you think the Muslim world is in crisis? What do you think? Would you say that?
I think crisis is too big of a word. I mean, we were in a crisis 300 years ago. I think what we have is known as the Jahiliyyah, Zaman Jahiliyyah Asani, the second age of ignorance.
Okay.
We are bottom of the barrel, so it's okay. There's only up.
And so we didn't get a chance yet. We did talk about Mufti Menk, and Mufti Menk's not the only one, but you've mentioned that many Muslim scholars speak differently in Arabic and English. In English, everything is nice and soft, and pet the cat or whatever you said, shine the cat. But like in Arabic, they say a lot more harsh things about non-Muslims, and
Yeah,
like that.
and Mank, of course, Mank was one of those fellas. We shouldn't celebrate birthdays and invite them and mix with non-Muslims. That's what he said.
Mm-hmm. And
You
why do you think
shouldn't.
this is bad to not celebrate birthdays and not mix with non-Muslims? I mean, why do you say that's bad?
I mean, this applies to me as well as your community over there. If you're a minority community and you have no relationship with the majority, there's disenfranchisement, there's a dichotomy, there's this, you are discounted, you have no say in policy, and people treat you as suspicion. And then things go bad. There's a downturn in the economy, there's a loss of jobs. When there's a national tragedy, you are the most likely suspect. It is important, especially for any minority, to have a relationship with the wider community. If we as Muslims don't police our own and take care of things, the non-Muslims will do it for us and it will not be comfortable. And these are lessons that the Muslims must understand. So when there are voices within the community that are extreme, that choose segregation, that are exclusivist, we must shut them down. Because they are an existential threat to us and our way of life, not just the wider community. Mank is just part of the problem. He tried to sue me, by the way. Send me a lawyer's letter by claiming defamation. And I wrote a rebuttal to his lawyer. To put it nicely, I humiliated the lawyer. I know my law. See, in Singapore, you can't sue for defamation unless you're in the country. And you must prove that there's loss of income. How is a guy who's supposed to be doing things for God going to prove that he lost a lot of money because he's selling afterlife insurance?
Selling afterlife insurance? What do you mean?
That's what Meng does, right? All these evangelists selling afterlife. You believe in me and follow what I say, you go to heaven. I guarantee you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
He came after you.
That was a mistake because I'm like I mentioned. Somebody asked me on the trade that I'm a sheep. I think that person obviously doesn't know me. I'm very much a sharp.
Can we talk? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You're saying?
This is interesting. We're talking about Muslim scholars and we're talking about sheep in wolf's clothing, wolf in sheep's clothing, whatever. Can we talk about the Sufi Tariqas? And you had a very interesting term, which I thought was very funny about these Tariqas.
Well, I say I have a lot of interesting things because that's the way I say these things come just naturally. You know what I mean? Now, I belonged to a Tariqa before. I was in the Naqshbandi Haqqani, and then I was a Muqaddam with another Tariqa. That means I could lead the Zikr and all that stuff. And I know my doctrines and all that. What I'm not a fan of is this, how certain groups, which I won't mention, right? But we all know. The way that is run is a bit more like a personality cult, and it's not a lot of emphasis on the doctrine of the school, and I don't like that, and so I left. And of course, within these groups, of course, we will never hear, but there were certain scandals, certain discomforts. It's not. I mean, we heard about Nouman Ali Khan and his shenanigans with the female of the species. It's not just a Salafi thing. It's
Yeah.
across the board. You know,
Yeah, I
we've
know
had
someone. I actually know I actually know someone that. Actually, I can't say, but someone that was very close to what happened to Nouman Ali Khan and was hurt by him because of what he did. I know. I can't say who it is, but anyways,
I know someone as well.
it's legit. It's like it's real what happened, right?
I know it's real because I know someone as well. The thing being in the sharing group is that every now and then when things happen, people private message me, and there's a lot of issues of female coercion, sexual abuse, sometimes even rape allegations. Here's a sad thing, and it's a true thing. There are quite a lot of female religious teachers who have been taken advantage of by male teachers. And they can't go to the community and say that this guy raped me, because what's going to come out is not good. They say that she's at fault and she was loose. It's not the guy's at fault. The guy was tempted, you know what I mean? And that's what's happening. It really happened. I know quite a few of them. It's
Yeah, whenever it's a rich and powerful person that's doing this, it's very difficult for the victim to come out and to accuse them because the entire community loves this guy. So you are going against, like, you're going to be ostracized. No one's going to believe you. Like the Muslims are gonna. I mean, they might. And I know there was a recent this Quran preacher Fatih something, and he was accused of like drugging his victims and this and that. And so there's actually a Muslim community group that was created. I think I forget the name now, but they're actually documenting this harassment like formally, and they're also having a bit of a struggle. They need funding, and these Muslim preachers obviously attack them as well, saying they're blowing it out of proportion and this and that. But I do see some maturity happening in the Muslim community, that there is organizations now to protect women, Muslim women and children from sexual abuse. So that's a good thing. I do see some changes coming. But you had a very funny term for this. You called it MLM for afterlife insurance. So why do you call it MLM, the Sufi Tariqas? How is it MLM? MLM means multi-level marketing. So basically you sign up someone and they sign up someone, and this person gets $5 for every person that they sign up, and that person gets
they
25.
don't actually. Here's the thing: they don't actually get money, right? Because only the sheikh gets money. Everyone else is broke. So what happened in many is, since you joined the tariqah, this is the only true way to the Prophet. Every other path is false, and every other Muslim is, one level lower. You're special, so you need to bring more people, and that's what happens. We have some of these shuyuk, they fly first class, but they visit their followers who stay in the poorer parts of town, and says we are collecting to build a mosque here and a mosque there. How many mosques do you need to build? Isn't it better to build a school? Isn't it better to give people a living wage, right? You have a house in a nice part of town, in a very expensive city. I can't say it because then you know exactly who that is. But
yeah,
that's how it is, and that's not right. And the thing is, that's not Islam. This is how another aspect of the religion that was meant to be beautiful has been corrupted. We have those issues. I mean, when I went against many of these people, Salafi and otherwise, right? I remember having a meeting with some of the leaders of the Muslim community, and it says, Terence, we will never accept you as one of us. I said, boo-hoo. I mean, when I decided to convert, it was a theological decision. I didn't convert because I wanted to be your friend. I don't know who you are. I don't share your values, right?
yeah.
And then they'll say, because they know I work in finance, that we will never, right, give you business. I say you're assuming that you can afford what I sell. I mean, at the risk of sounding like, a bit elitist, right? I mean, I handle ultra high net worth clients.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think ultra high net worth, you don't think Muslims.
Oh my God. Do you feel safer being in Singapore and being able to do this rather than in a Muslim country? What would happen to you if you were in Malaysia right now?
If I were in Malaysia, I wouldn't be me. I mean, I'm outspoken, but I'm not stupid.
I mean, same thing with me too. I mean, I have nightmares. I mean, I'm sorry to say, I have nightmares that I'm trapped in a Muslim country. I'm scared, like deep in the back of my mind, I know what'll happen to me if I ever end up in a Muslim jail in a Muslim country. No one will ever see me again. That's the end of Abdullah Samir, and that I'm done. So I'm glad you acknowledge that reality. That is, it's unfortunate. Anyone that goes against, Muslim community has a long way to go. And just sorry to say, it's just the Christian community, at least the Western world, you're allowed to criticize Christianity and nothing happens for the most part. It does happen. You could be threatened and whatever, but the Muslim community is very dogmatic and it's very,
I'm a advocate of secularism because for society to function, we must be able to criticize things. Of course, that criticism has to be valid, right? It cannot be insults for the sake of insult. It has to be genuine criticism because that's how things grow. Even religion needs to be criticized. It needs to be taken out a peg or two. If we need to find our place with God, we need to remove the hubris that we are in the right. Muslim communities cannot do that. And because of that, what they have of Islam is essentially ossified. Every time there has been a Muslim majority, going all the way back to the earliest days of Islam, the non-Muslim minority have always had some of their rights curbed. That is not the kind of society that I believe in. There should be freedom of religion. If you want to come to Islam, by all means. You want to believe God is a chimpanzee? It's up to you. You want to leave? Go. A God that is absolute is not enhanced because everybody is a Muslim. Neither is he diminished because everyone leaves. And that's it. Muslims don't have that. I mean, Christians don't have that too, but But Muslims, they get very emotional about these things.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if we went back, 500 years, Christians did the same thing. They threw people in jail, and secularism is what is new now, is what we have, and what protects. Although, again, even with secularism, look at India. You have mobs beating up Muslims for selling beef. I mean, they don't even sell beef because they know it's like dangerous to their life, but they're still accused of it, kidnapping cows. Oh, you kidnapped cows? We're gonna beat you to death now. I mean, I keep seeing videos on Twitter from India right now, which are like horrifying, under secularism. So secularism is part of it. We also need liberalism. We also need equal rights for everyone. You also need the government to protect minorities, from the majority sometimes. I mean, this sort of thing goes into an extreme in the Western countries now where, people like me are accused of Islamophobia. And some people are genuinely doing Islamophobia. And what I mean by that is anti-Muslim bigotry. They are actually demonizing Muslims. Robert Spencer, one of my opponents, like that's his bread and butter. His entire spiel is, look at this bad Muslim guy. Look at this bad Muslim guy. Look at this guy. Look what this Muslim guy did. He beat his wife. He killed his wife. Okay. Yes, Muslim guy killed his wife. But if you look at the statistics, he fits right into the rest of America or the rest of whatever country you're pointing him out. Why are you pointing him out? Because he's Muslim. Okay, well, what does that have to do? What's the point? What are you trying to get at? Should we be scared of Muslim immigrants? Is that what you're trying to say, Robert Spencer? Because that's just, so people like that, I would think that these are Islamophobes. I don't like the word Islamophobe. I don't like the word Islamophobia because it's usually used to shut down criticism of Islam. I don't like that word. But if you want to say anti-Muslim bigotry, I'm completely on board. I'm completely against anti-Muslim bigotry. And I do think that we need to differentiate between criticizing the theology versus taking away people's rights. But don't you think secularism as well can also not like, what do you think about India now? Like, how is secularism helping
If
us?
you wanted secularism that is wrong, I think it's the French version of militant secularism. That's not the way to go.
Okay.
Because then you make secularism the new god.
Yeah.
You know, what we need, I mean, everything to an extreme is bad.
Yeah.
We need a certain sense of space where there can be dialogue and there be criticism within reason. In the same way that we cannot have absolute free speech. That's a terrible idea, right? We cannot have absolute secularism, because that will mean that there's actually no spirituality in anything that we do except the state, and that's fascism. And that's
Yeah,
the
we
thing
don't want
about,
fascism.
yeah. See, that's the thing about politics and society that people need to understand, that you can't get too much here and there. You know, basically just balancing out where you want. If you go too much in one direction, something's going to happen. It's never good. We need to state one thing Islam did say correctly, you know, is the middle path. Basically, we need to be centered. What we have right now is not. We don't have that at the moment.
One more thing I wanted to say about what you were saying about the Sufi Tariqas, just to expand on that a little bit more, I kind of switched topics. What we have is these men that are going from community to community, and they are profiting off even the poor and the middle class, and they are living like kings. They have like big fat bellies, all these fancy rings, they have private jets. When they go to a certain community, they take over people's houses. They're granted because of the kindness of the locals. The local person will give them the house to stay in. They'll feed them. They'll pretty much almost worship them. And
they have the best foods. They have the best houses. They have a lot of time to meet the local politicians and the wealthy businessmen. And then maybe you meet one or two poor person, you know, for them to take blessings and all that. If you're going to collect all that money, would it make more sense to just give it to all these people? How much money do you need?
Yeah.
Right? Flying first class in a house in Bel Air. I don't believe in these people.
And these people are considered to be the most purest people in the community. They're like saints. They're like holy men. They're like, some of them even claim to have miracles, right? Like the awliya of Allah. I heard one Sufi guy, some Sufi imam in my mosque, you know, when I was leaving Islam, I went to talk to this guy, and he told me, I saw miracles. You won't believe it. And he didn't tell me what the miracle was. I was, of course, very skeptical because I don't believe in that. But
I saw the miracle of Istanbul in 2005. Do you watch soccer? See, you don't understand. So
they won? What happened?
Liverpool came from 3-0 down, you know, to draw AC Milan, won a penalty. So that's a miracle, I believe.
Yeah, so that is, I think that's your issue with some of these Sufi tariqas. And I mean, Salafis as well criticize them for taking advantage of the followers, because some of these Sufi sheiks, they'll tell I think they call murids, the followers, to like bark like dogs, bow down before them, clean their feet. They use all of these things as an excuse of testing the ego, because you don't want to have an ego, right? Sufism teaches that you have to annihilate your ego. So they make them do all these like horrible things. And of course, sexual exploitation of women as well, and maybe men too. But yeah,
men as well. There was one case a couple of years back about some guy who said because he was close to the Prophet, for some reason he convinced a couple of guys to polish his penis.
Oh, that's what you were saying about polish the cat. Okay, now I get it. Yeah.
Now here's the thing, I mean, this guy is obviously exploitative. But what kind of idiot are you to believe this kind of bullshit?
You know, there's definitely a very human thing, and we'll end off in the next couple of minutes. There's definitely a very human deficiency in falling for cults. Like this is something that certain personality types, certain things are going on in their lives. Like if you hear interviews of people that go into cults, and when they finally leave the cult, they're like, I can't believe how stupid I was. How did I fall for this? Like, it's so obviously false. This guy's lying to us. You know, some of them, they said the day of judgment's coming, these guys, false messiahs or whatever. And then the day of judgment date doesn't come. and they say, yeah, God changed the date to now, like 5 years later or something, and they
I
still
know.
believe it.
I know
And
a Sufi sheikh who every few years predicted the end of the world was coming. You know, and his followers, idiot followers, would sell their possessions and wait the hills. You know, this year is Hajj Akbar. Yeah, the Mahdi is coming this year, and the Mahdi is coming this year. And the guy was always late, obviously. You know, Mahdi never came.
yeah, it's so terrible that human, like all these people, like I was interviewing a guy that was in Jehovah's Witnesses, and he said there was this big thing. I forget the year, 1961 or 1971. He made a T-shirt, "I survived 1971" or whatever it was, 1983, because that's when the Day of Judgment was supposed to come. And these guys, like you said, they sold all their belongings because they thought the Day of Judgment's coming, and then of course it didn't come, and now they're screwed. They sold it. Some of them had like multi-million-dollar businesses they sold off, carpet cleaning or dry cleaning or whatever it was, and now they're left with nothing because they gave up all their wealth because the Day of Judgment was coming. And it's sad. It's so sad. It's, so I want to give
I
you
mean,
the
think about it.
chance.
If the day of judgment
Go
was
ahead, go ahead.
coming,
I was
what
just
do
gonna
you?
say I'm gonna give you a chance to give
No,
the
no. I
last
think about
words.
it. I mean, I was just thinking, if the day of judgment was coming, why would you sell your business? Who are you going to sell it to? Is the day of judgment going to come to you and not to them?
Well, you're gonna sell it to someone else who is a chump who doesn't know it's coming, and you're gonna take the money and you're gonna donate it to God, right? Because now you're gonna be blessed.
What are you going
I
to do with the
guess.
money?
I don't know. Donate it, maybe.
I mean, see the logic of it. You know what I mean,
It's not logical, right?
yeah.
So I want to give you the chance to say the final last words. Thank you for coming. It's been a wonderful conversation. I don't talk to too many Muslims on this channel, although I'd love to. I don't have a problem with that. Your views are very refreshing. You definitely are willing to take a stand on things that are important to you, and to speak out against the masses in some regards. You're going against, not speak against the masses. You're going against the norm. Let's put it like that. You're going against the grain, and that's refreshing. That the Muslim world needs more of this. We need more intellectuals that are not just parroting the same thing, that just because Imam Shafi said this, we have to do this. Okay, no, we don't want that. We need a new take. Islam is not going to, and the funny thing is, Muslims, not all Muslims, hate you for this. They hate people like you because you're dragging them out of the cave, and they want to stay with the norm. They want status quo, but they don't realize that if it wasn't for people like you, there would be even more people leaving Islam. You are actually doing a service to the Muslim community, which I see that. As a non-Muslim, I see that. Some Muslims don't see that, and they don't want to be they want to stay in the cave. They don't want to be dragged out of the cave. They want to stay there. So I do appreciate what you're doing. Obviously, I don't agree with you on your conclusions that Islam is true or that Allah exists or whatever, but that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is we want to work for a better world, and a better world comes from people that give rights to others, that follow, secularism is what we need. Obviously not the extreme, secularism like you said. So the last words, the chance is over to you now to give last words and to share whatever platform you have. I think Facebook is back up, so I'll share that on the screen as well. Oh no, it's still not working. So any last words and anything you want to share from your end, or where people can find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. I'm the only Terence Nunis on Facebook. I'm the only Terence Nunis on Quora. In fact, I'm the only Terence Nunis anyway, so it's very easy to find me. I don't know whether Islam is true. I know it's true for me to a certain extent. It's a label that we have for my theological beliefs. But I have no guarantees that it's true, and I make no claims that it's true. In the sense that what may be true for me may not necessarily be true for you. It's all stages of realization. So in that being the case, I think people should be free to find their own truths. The problem is that instead of finding your own truths, people spend so much time being angry about what other people believe. I mean, somebody believes something different. You don't agree, and fine, move on, right? And if you find that you have less time focusing on that, more time focusing on what we want in life, we can make better use of our time. I hope that's helpful to others.
Yes, it was amazing. It was very, very much appreciated. I should have done this a long time ago, and I'm glad to have you on and to share your thoughts. maybe in the next few years we can have another conversation and reflect on certain things that have happened since now and then, the state of the Muslim community. And of course, stay safe, stay well, continue doing what you're doing. The links are in the social media. The links to your social media are shared below. So if you guys want to check out Terence, maybe request an invite to the sharing group if you like this sort of thing and you want to converse more with Terence and the others in the group. There's also other like-minded people in the group, not just him, right? So there's good conversations going on in there, and some spicy masala debates as well happening in there sometimes. I remember one guy got mad at you for posting a picture of a lady or something holding a banana. He got mad at that. He's like, "Why are you posting sexually enticing photos or something?" It was a girl holding a banana. It was like, oh my god, that was funny.
I was being a troll. I knew exactly what it was.
Yes, so please do like the video. If you enjoyed, if you enjoyed the show, please do thumbs up the video. Consider joining the channel. Click join now below, or you can also support me on Patreon. One day I hope to do this full time. So if not, that's okay. I will continue doing this part-time as well. That's fine. I loved having these conversations. I truly enjoyed speaking with you. It was really good. Thank you so much, and stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you in the sharing group.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.